The relay gate had been dead for 900 years. Every species in the Paulian network knew this. It was listed in the old maps as collapsed, unstable, and permanently sealed. So when it suddenly flared white and spat out a ship that looked like it had been chewed up and taped back together, every alarm on monitoring station 12 went off at once. The station commander, a Paulian named Solian, watched the feed from his tower. The ship was small by Accord standards, dented, scarred. One of its engines was visibly cracked, leaking vapor into the vacuum like breath on a cold day. It drifted forward slowly, not with the confidence of an invasion force, but with the exhaustion of something that had been running for a very long time. Solian followed the protocol, as he always did. He sent a classification request to the ship. This was standard. Every vessel entering Accord space was required to transmit a species code, a territorial registration, and a rank status within the Galactic Index. Without these, a ship could not dock, trade, or communicate through official channels. The response came back in a language the system had never heard. The translation matrix took 11 seconds to decode it, which was 10 seconds longer than it had ever taken before. The message read, "Hey, sorry about that. We are a bit lost. Is anyone hurt on your end?" Solian read it 3 times. Then he forwarded it to the Accord's central archive for analysis. The archive flagged it immediately, not as a threat, but as an anomaly. No species in 12,000 cycles of recorded contact had ever opened communications by asking about the well-being of the other side. The ship identified itself as the Drifter. It carried 214 passengers. They called themselves humans. Solian had never heard of them, that he ran the name through every database the Accord maintained. Nothing. No record. No prior contact. No genetic profile. No territorial claim. Humans did not exist in the system. And yet here they were, floating outside his station, asking if anyone was hurt. Aboard the Drifter, things were bad. Ravi Malin stood in the engine room with grease on his hands and worry on his face. The main recycler was failing. The backup had failed 2 weeks ago. They had air for maybe 10 days if nobody moved around too much, and considering there were 40 children on board, nobody moving around too much was not realistic. Duna WYSD, the ship's biologist and only medic, came down the corridor carrying a list of injuries from the rough transit through the gate. 3 broken arms, 1 concussion, a dozen cuts and bruises. Nothing fatal. She handed the list to Ravi and said, "We got lucky." Ravi looked at the cracked engine readout and said, "That is one word for it." They had not planned to be here. The Drifter was a colony ship built to carry families to a new world called Prospect. But Prospect Star had flared 6 months into the journey, turning the planet into a ball of glass. They had no destination after that, just fuel, fading hope, and a captain who had died of a heart attack somewhere around month 4. Ravi was the engineer. He was not supposed to be in charge, but the ship needed someone who could keep things running, and he was the only one who knew how everything worked, so they drifted. And then the old relay gate opened, and Ravi made the call to go through because the alternative was dying slowly in open space. Now, they were here. Wherever here was, the Accord sent a second message to the Drifter. It was formal and clipped, unregistered vessel. Transmit species classification, territorial index, and rank. Failure to comply will result in containment. Ravi read it and turned to Duna. "What do you think our rank is?" Duna shrieked. "Alive. That should count for something." Ravi typed back. "We do not have a species code or a rank. We are humans from a planet called Earth. We are not military. We are families. Our ship is damaged and we need help. We can offer labor, skills, or conversation in exchange. Please advise." This message caused even more confusion than the first one. The Accord had no framework for a species that offered to work in exchange for aid. Trade was conducted through sanctioned brokers. Labor was assigned by caste. Conversation had no transactional value whatsoever. The humans were speaking a language the Accord understood word by word, but could not comprehend as a whole. High Mediator Solian sat in his tower long after the messages stopped. He replayed the first transmission again and again. "Is anyone hurt on your end?" It was such a small question, such a simple thing to ask. And yet no one in the history of the network had ever thought to ask it. He opened a secure channel to the Accord Council and sent a brief report. It contained the sensor data, the communication logs, and the ship's biological scan, which showed a species that was somehow both fragile and stubborn, with bones that healed after breaking and a heart rate that spiked under stress, but did not stop until the bottom of the report. Sullivan added a personal note. It was not protocol, but he wrote it anyway. They asked if we were hurt. I do not know why this disturbs me. Perhaps because in 12,000 cycles, I never thought to ask anyone the same. He sealed the report and sent it. Outside the station, the drifter floated in the dark, its one working engine glowing faintly like a candle that refused to go out. Nobody on Belron's cradle had seen a new species in over 1,000 cycles. The way station was old, efficient, and boring. Ships docked, goods moved, species kept to their assigned corridors, and the protocol made sure every interaction followed the same careful script it always had. Nothing surprised anyone. That was the point. Then the humans arrived, and the surprises did not stop. The Accord granted them temporary docking in Sector 9, the lowest priority section of the station. The air was thin there, the lights were dim, and the walls had not been repaired in decades. It was where the Accord put things it did not care about. Ravi looked around the sector when they docked and said, "Well, it has walls. That is more than we had yesterday." The rules were simple. Stay in Sector 9. Do not enter communal areas. Do not engage with other species outside of approved trade windows. Do not touch anything that did not belong to them. The humans followed these rules for about 6 hours. Duna was the first to wander. She was not trying to break rules. She was trying to find a bathroom. The drifter's plumbing had failed during docking, and the station's directory system was written in a language she could not read. She followed the corridors until she found a large open area filled with benches, soft lighting, and silence. IT was the communal hall. A dozen species sat in separate clusters, each group keeping precise distance from the others as the protocol required. In the far corner, alone, sat a Dreven. Duna had never seen one before. It was enormous. Its body was dense and gray, covered in something between skin and stone. It did not move. It did not make any sound. A small sign near its bench read, in translated text, non-communicative, "Do not engage." Duna walked over and sat down next to it. She did not talk. She did not touch it. She just sat there because where she came from, no one should have to sit alone in a room full of people. The Dreven did not react. Other species in the hall glanced at her and then looked away, confused. The protocol said the Dreven were silent. Everyone accepted that. Duna simply did not care what the protocol said. That on the other side of the station, Ravi found trouble of a different kind. He had gone looking for parts to fix the drifter's recycler and stumbled into a Grellian trade hub. A merchant named Fenwick was arguing with a dock worker over a broken water recycler that had been sitting in a corner for weeks. The part was cracked, and no one could fix it because the Grellian Repair Guild had not approved a work order. Ravi looked at it for about 30 seconds, pulled a tool from his belt, and fixed it. Fenwick stared at him. "What is the cost?" "Nothing," Ravi said. "It was just a cracked seal. Took 2 minutes. Nothing is not a valid exchange unit," Fenwick said slowly, as though explaining something to a child. "I did not exchange anything. I just helped." Fenwick blinked all 4 of his eyes in rapid sequence, which was the Grellian equivalent of a system error. He filed a formal report within the hour. Free labor was not allowed. It disrupted the exchange index, destabilized local pricing, and worst of all, it made the paying customers ask questions like, "Why am I paying for this if a new species does it for free?" Ravi did not understand what the problem was. He went back to Sector 9 and fixed 3 more things on the way. But the strangest event of the day had nothing to do with Ravi or Duna. It happened in Corridor 7, where a group of human children had gathered near a viewport to play a clapping game. They sang a song, slapped their hands together in rhythm, and laughed when someone missed. It was loud and messy and completely pointless by every Accord standard that a Paulian linguist named Serene was passing through the corridor and stopped. She watched the children for several minutes. She recorded the sounds they made, the high-pitched bursts of noise that came when one of them stumbled or fell. She ran the recording through her translation matrix. IT came back as unidentified vocalization. No linguistic content. No threat detected. Purpose unknown. Serene watched for a while longer. The children did not notice her. They were too busy laughing. She filed the recording under a new category she created on the spot. Sounds with no purpose. She did not know it yet, but that category would grow very large in the coming days to be by the end of the first day. Fenwick had filed his complaint with the Accord. It was detailed, precise, and deeply frustrated. He listed every violation: unauthorized movement, unregistered labor, social engagement with a non-communicative species, and the production of unclassified vocalizations in a public corridor. His final line read, "They are breaking everything, and they are not even doing it on purpose." Salian read the complaint from his tower. He pulled up the station's internal feeds and watched the footage. He saw Duna sitting quietly beside the Dreven. He saw Ravi fixing things and refusing payment. He saw the children laughing in the corridor. None of it was hostile. None of it was strategic. And none of it fit inside any framework the Accord had ever built. Salian closed the feed and sat in the dark for a long time. Somewhere below him, in the lowest sector of the station, 200 humans were settling in for the night, completely unaware that they had just broken a system that had not changed in 12,000 years. They had done it with a smile, a handshake, and a clapping game. The Accord had a test for everything. When a new species entered the network, it was measured, scanned, and sorted into a category that determined its rights, its rank, and its place. Predator or prey, hive or individual, logical or instinctive. The system was clean, precise, and had worked without failure for 12,000 cycles. Humans broke it in 3 days. The biological scans came back first. A Paulian scientist named Draywan reviewed the results and immediately requested a second scan because he assumed the first one was corrupted. It was not. Humans had forward-facing eyes like predators, but formed social bonds like herd species. Their bones broke easily but healed stronger than before. Their bodies ran on a chemical system that could flood them with enough energy to lift heavy objects or run without stopping. But the same system also caused them to cry when they heard certain kinds of music. They were soft and fragile, yet the scan showed scars on almost every adult aboard the drifter. Not from war, from living. They tripped, fell, burned themselves cooking, and kept going. Draywan added a note to the file. Species does not fit existing categories. Recommend new classification. He did not know what that classification should be. The behavioral analysis was worse. The Accord's social monitors tracked the humans for 72 hours and produced a report that read like a list of contradictions. Humans competed with each other, then immediately helped the loser. They argued loudly, then embraced. They formed hierarchies that shifted based on context, meaning a person who led in one situation would follow in another without any loss of status. One monitor wrote, "They appear to operate on a system of flexible authority based on competence and trust rather than rank. This system should not work." It does. But what concerned the Accord most was not what the humans did inside their own sector. It was what they did to everyone else. A Paulian trader named Galen had spoken to Ravi on the second day, just a brief exchange about supply costs. It was the most basic interaction possible. But the next morning, Galen greeted a Grelian customer by saying, "How are you today?" The Grelian froze. No one had ever asked him that in a trade setting. It was not part of the script. Galen did not even realize he had done it until the Grelian walked away looking confused at a Grelian dockworker named Pell, who had watched the human children play from behind a support beam, started humming while he loaded cargo. Grelians did not hum. They had no musical tradition, no concept of idle sound-making. Pell could not explain why he was doing it. He just said it felt right. And then there was Omoth. The Dreven had not moved from its bench in the communal hall for years. The station staff had long stopped checking on it. The protocol listed Dreven as non-communicative, and that was that. But Duna had come back every day. She brought a cup of water, set it on the bench beside the massive creature, and sat in silence. She read. She hummed. Sometimes she talked quietly about the plants she had studied on Earth, the way ferns uncurled in spring, the sound rain made on broad leaves that, on the third day, Omoth produced a vibration. It was low and deep. Something felt more than heard. The station's sensors picked it up and ran it through the translation matrix. The output was 2 words: "You stayed." Duna did not make a big deal of it. She just smiled and said, "Of course I did." When the report reached Salyun, he read it 4 times. A species classified as non-communicative for 400 cycles had spoken, because a human sat next to it. The council meeting was tense. Salyun stood before the delegates and laid out the situation calmly. The humans could not be classified. They were spreading behaviors that had no precedent. Other species were changing in small but measurable ways after contact with them. And the Dreven had spoken for the first time in 4 centuries. They are not a threat, Salyun said carefully, but they are a disruption. And the protocol has no tolerance for disruption. A delegate from the Grelian Trade Federation spoke. They gave away labor for free. Our pricing index is already shifting. A Paulian cultural officer added, 3 of our citizens have begun using informal greetings. This is not standard. The proposal was quarantine. Restrict the humans to their sector permanently. Cut off all contact. Wait until the behavioral contamination faded, then reassess. Salyun knew this was the logical choice. The protocol demanded stability. Humans were the opposite of stability. They were messy, unpredictable, and they left marks on everything they touched. He approved the quarantine. But before he signed the final order, Ravi was brought before the council. He stood in the center of the chamber, a short man in a stained jacket, surrounded by towering aliens who had governed stars for centuries. He did not look scared. He looked tired. "We are not trying to change anything," Ravi said. His voice was calm and steady. "We're just trying to survive. And where we come from, you survive by helping each other. That is all we know how to do." The chamber was silent. Salyun looked at the order on his screen. His hand hovered over the seal. He pressed it. The quarantine was official, but as Ravi was escorted out, Salyun noticed something he could not explain. The 2 Paulian guards walking beside the human were standing closer to him than protocol required. Not restraining him, just walking with him, like they did not want him to walk alone. Salyun closed his eyes and wondered what was happening to his station. The quarantine barriers went up at midnight. Heavy panels slid across the corridor entrances to Sector 9, sealing the humans inside with a sound like a door closing on a tomb. Station security posted guards at every access point. The official order was clear: no contact, no trade, no communication until further notice. Inside the sector, Ravi gathered everyone in the Drifter's cargo hold. 214 people sat on crates, leaned against walls, and held their children close. They were tired. They were scared. And they were running out of air. The recycler was dying. Ravi had patched it 6 times already, and each patch held a little less than the last. At the current rate, they had about 4 days before the air became dangerous. Maybe 5 if people stayed still. Ravi did not lie to them. He never did. "Our air is running low," he said. "The station has sealed us in. I do not know when they will let us out, or if they will. So we need to be smart. We can serve what we have. We fix what we can. And we do not panic." A woman near the back asked, "What if they just leave us here?" Ravi paused. Then he said, "Then we figured out. That is what we do." He organized repair crews immediately. Every person with engineering skills was put on the recycler. Duna set up a makeshift medical station using the last of their supplies. Parents created a rotation to keep the children calm and distracted. Nobody sat idle. Nobody gave up. Then Ravi did something that no one in the Accord expected. He sent a message to the station. Not a plea, not a protest, just a simple, open broadcast on the general channel. "This is Ravi Malin aboard the Drifter. We understand your decision to quarantine us, and we respect it. We will manage with what we have. But if anyone on the station needs help with anything, our offer still stands. We are here." Salyun read the message in his tower. He read it again. Then he sat very still for a long time. A quarantine species offering help to the people who locked them in. There was no record of this ever happening. The protocol had procedures for threats, for negotiations, for surrender. It had nothing for kindness from a cage that he did not respond. But he did not delete the message either. For 2 days, nothing happened. The barrier stayed up. The humans worked on their recycler and rationed their food. The station continued as normal. Or, at least it tried to. On the third morning, a crate of water purification tablets appeared outside the Sector 9 barrier. No name attached. No shipping code. Just a plain box left on the floor where the guards could see it. The guards looked at each other, shrugged, and pushed it through the gap at the bottom of the barrier. That afternoon, another package arrived. Food packs. Enough for 50 people for 2 days. Again, no sender to by the evening. A data chip was slipped under the barrier by an anonymous hand. Ravi plugged it in and found schematics for an air filtration unit compatible with the drifter systems. The file had been stripped of all identifying markers, but the design was clearly Paulian engineering. Someone on the station had spent hours adapting it to fit human technology. Ravi built the filter that night. The air in the drifter improved within hours. The small rebellions kept coming. A Grellian merchant left a toolkit near the barrier and walked away without looking back. A Paulian maintenance worker rerouted a power line so that Sector 9 received an extra 10% energy and then deleted the work order from the system. A group of station workers started eating their meals near the barrier, not inside the human sector, just close enough that the humans could hear voices on the other side. And then Omoth moved. The Driven had not left the communal hall in decades. Its massive body had settled into the bench so deeply that most people assumed it was part of the furniture. But on the third day of the quarantine, station sensors detected movement. Omoth stood slowly, like a mountain deciding to walk. It crossed the hall, entered the corridor, and made its way to Sector 9. T sat down outside the seal barrier and began to vibrate. Low, steady, continuous. The sound traveled through the metal walls and into the sector beyond. Duna, who was treating a child's fever near the barrier, heard it. She stopped, walked to the wall, placed her hand flat against the cold surface, and hummed back. They stayed like that for hours. A human and a Driven, separated by 3 inches of metal, making sounds that meant nothing in any language but meant everything in the space between them. The moment that changed things, though, was Fenwick, the same Grellian broker who had filed the original complaint against the humans. The one who said they were breaking everything. He was caught on a security feed, carrying food packs to the barrier at 2 in the morning. When security stopped him, he did not apologize. He did not cite a regulation or a loophole. He looked the guard directly in the eyes and said, "Their children were hungry. I do not need a protocol to know that is wrong." The guard let him pass. Salyan watched all of this from his tower. Every feed, every delivery, every small act of defiance. He watched his station, his perfectly ordered, protocol-driven station, come apart at the seams. Not with violence, not with revolution, with food packs and humming and a Grellian who could not sleep knowing children were hungry on the other side of a wall. He pulled up the quarantine status report and stared at the screen. The humans were still sealed in. But somehow, they were everywhere. The quarantine was not containing them. It was spreading them. The warning came without fanfare. A single tone across every channel on the station, followed by a flat, mechanical voice reading coordinates and projections. The Valen Nebula, a dying cloud of gas and radiation 3 light hours from Belrun's cradle, had begun collapsing ahead of schedule. The collapse would generate a radiation wave. The station's shields could handle it. The 23 mining vessels working on the far side of the nebula could not. 47 miners. Grellian and Driven crews who worked the deep rock fields, pulling ore from asteroids that floated in the nebula's shadow. They were low-caste workers. Their ships were old, their shields were thin, and the wave would reach them in 6 hours. The Accord ran its calculations. Evacuation of the miners would require sending ships into the collapsing nebula through radiation spikes and gravitational shear that made navigation nearly suicidal. The cost was high. The value of the miners, according to the protocol's resource index, was low. The Accord classified them as acceptable losses and began evacuating high-value assets from the station's outer ring instead. Ravi heard the broadcast through the Drifter's patch communication array. He listened to the whole thing. The coordinates, the timeline, the classification. Acceptable losses. 47 people written off because the math said they were not worth saving. He stood up and walked to the drifter's bridge. Asha, Nor was already there. She was sitting in the pilot's chair, boots on the console, reading the same broadcast on her screen. She looked at Ravi when he entered and said nothing. She did not need to. They had known each other long enough that some conversations happened without words. "Can you fly through it?" Ravi asked. "The nebula is collapsing. Radiation is spiking. Gravity is shifting every few minutes." Asha tilted her head. "Probably. Probably is not a yes. Probably is all I have ever had. Has not stopped me yet." Ravi looked at the quarantine barrier on the main screen. They were still sealed in. Breaking out would violate every order the Accord had given them. It would confirm every fear the Council had about humans being uncontrollable. It would end any chance of peaceful residency. He unsealed the drifter's docking clamps. The quarantine barrier was not designed to stop a ship from launching. It was designed to stop people from walking through corridors. The drifter pulled away from the dock and swung out into open space before station security even registered what was happening. Asha pushed the engines hard. The drifter groaned. Its hull, already scarred and patched, vibrated under the strain. One engine was still cracked. The air filter Ravi had built was rattling in its housing. The ship was not built for this. It was built to carry families to a quiet world and sit on the ground forever. But Asha flew it like it was a warship, and the drifter responded like it understood what was being asked of it. The nebula was beautiful and terrible. Clouds of purple and gold gas swirled around collapsing pockets of gravity. Radiation flared in sheets of white light that could cook an unshielded ship in seconds. Asha threaded the drifter through gaps that closed behind them, riding gravitational currents like a surfer riding waves, adjusting course every few seconds as the nebula shifted around them. Duna was in the cargo hold, setting up a medical station with supplies that barely filled one table. She had bandages, painkillers, and a radiation treatment kit designed for 5 people. There would be 47 patients. She laid everything out neatly and decided she would make it work because there was no other option. They reached the mining cluster in 4 hours. The ships were huddled together behind an asteroid, their shields flickering, their crews sending distress signals that no one had answered. When the drifter appeared on their sensors, the lead miner, a Grellian named Torv, sent a message. "Who are you?" The Accord said no one was coming. Ravi answered, "We are not the Accord. Open your airlocks." The evacuation took 90 minutes. Ravi coordinated the transfers. Asha kept the drifter steady in shifting gravity while miners crossed between ships on tether lines. Duna treated radiation burns in the cargo hold, moving from patient to patient with calm hands and a voice that never wavered. Some of the Dreven miners were too large for the standard stretchers. Human crew members carried them on their backs. 47 miners. Every single one. The return trip was worse. The nebula was collapsing faster now, and the drifter was heavier with the extra passengers. Asha flew on instinct, making corrections she could not explain, finding paths through the chaos that should not have existed. The ship's hull temperature rose. Warning lights turned red, then flashed, then stopped flashing because the sensors themselves burned out. Asha kept flying. They cleared the nebula's edge with 12 minutes to spare. Behind them, the cloud collapsed into a bright, spinning disk of superheated gas that would burn for 1,000 years. The drifter limped back to Belrun's cradle, trailing smoke and vapor. Half its hull was scorched black. The cracked engine had finally given out completely, and they drifted the last distance on momentum alone. Every screen on the station showed the same image. A broken ship, barely holding together, carrying 47 people that the system had already decided were not worth saving. Salian stood at the observation deck and watched the drifter approach. His hands were clasped behind his back. His face showed nothing. But when the ship passed close enough for him to see the scorch marks on its hull and the small figures moving behind its cracked viewports, he whispered something that the station's audio sensors barely caught. They went back. They always go back. The council chamber had not been this full in centuries. Every delegate from every species in the Accord had come, either in person or through their communication links. The room hummed with low conversations, shifting bodies, and the quiet tension of people who knew that whatever happened next would change things permanently. Salian stood at the center and waited for silence. It came slowly, like a tide pulling back. 3 days ago, he began, the humans broke quarantine. They took their damaged ship into a collapsing nebula and retrieved 47 miners that this council had classified as acceptable losses. He paused. They brought every one of them back alive. The chamber was quiet. This council must now decide what to do with the human species. They have violated the protocol. They have disrupted trade, social behavior, and communication standards across the station. They have influenced other species in ways we did not predict and cannot fully measure. Salian folded his long, crystalline hands. The floor is open. The first to speak was a delegate from the Paulian Cultural Authority. They are a contamination. Every day they remain, more of our citizens adopt their behaviors. Informal greetings. Unsanctioned emotional responses. A maintenance worker was found singing in a service tunnel last night. Singing. We do not sing. A Grelian trade delegate spoke next. Their concept of free labor has destabilized 3 pricing sectors. If this continues, our entire exchange model will need restructuring. A third delegate, from a species that rarely spoke at council meetings, said simply, "They frighten me. Not because they're dangerous, because they make me want to act like them, and I do not understand why." The arguments went back and forth. Expulsion. Permanent quarantine. Forced relocation to an uninhabited system. The options were logical, clean, and exactly what the protocol was designed to produce. Then Fenwick stood. The Grelian broker was small even by species standards. He barely reached the height of the speaking platform. But when he spoke, his voice carried across the chamber with a clarity that surprised everyone, including himself. "I was the one who filed the first complaint against the humans," he said. "I reported their free labor, their social violations, their children making noise in the corridors. I wanted them contained because they were disrupting my trade operations." He paused. "And then I carried food to their barrier at 2 in the morning because their children were hungry and I could not sleep knowing that." The chamber was silent. "They did what we should have done," Fenwick said. 47 miners were dying, and we did the math. We calculated their value, found it insufficient, and moved on. The humans did not calculate. They just went. In a broken ship, with a cracked engine, into a collapsing nebula. Because people were in danger, and that was enough reason. He looked around the chamber. If our protocol cannot account for that, then our protocol is broken. Before anyone could respond, a vibration filled the room. Deep, steady, rising from the floor like the pulse of something ancient waking up. The delegates fell silent, not because of protocol, but because the sound demanded it. Omoth had entered the chamber. The Dreven moved slowly down the center aisle, each step sending tremors through the floor. It had not attended a council meeting in 400 cycles. It had not spoken to anyone in that time, except for 2 words to a human woman who had refused to let it sit alone. Omoth stopped at the center of the room, and the vibration changed. The translation matrix struggled, then produced the words one by one, as though pulling them from a language that had been sleeping for centuries. They listened. "That is enough." The chamber remained silent for a long time after that. Salian called the vote. It was not unanimous. These things rarely were. But the majority held, and when it was done, the quarantine was lifted. The humans were granted provisional residency on Belrun's cradle, not as a classified species, because no classification fit. Salian created a new designation, something that had never existed in 12,000 cycles of Accord governance. Open category. A species that could not be predicted, could not be contained, and should not be. Ravi was brought to the chamber to sign the residency agreement. He walked in still wearing his stained engineer's jacket, with grease under his fingernails and dark circles under his eyes. He read the document carefully. He nodded. Then he picked up the writing tool and added a single handwritten line at the bottom of the page. "If anyone needs help, ask us." Salian looked at the line and said nothing. But he did not remove it. 6 months passed. The Belrun's cradle was not the same station it had been. The corridors were louder now. Not with chaos, but with life. Paulian traders greeted customers by name and asked how their families were. Grellian merchants laughed during negotiations, a sound that had no entry in any Grellian dictionary 6 months ago. Dreven sat in the communal hall, surrounded by other species, vibrating softly, and others sat with them and listened. Human children still played in the corridors. They taught clapping games to Grellian children who did not have the right number of hands for it, but tried anyway. The sound of laughter echoed off the metal walls, and nobody filed a report about it anymore because everyone knew what laughter was now. Duna still sat with Omoth every morning. They did not always speak. Sometimes they just watched the station wake up together. Ravi kept fixing things. He never charged for it. Salyan stood at the observation deck one evening, watching the lights of the station below. He opened his personal log, something he had kept for 300 years, and wrote his final entry on the matter. They entered the system, and nothing behaved the same. I spent weeks trying to understand why. I think I finally do. It was not that they changed us. It is that they reminded us of something we forgot so long ago that we did not even know it was missing. They reminded us that systems are not built for their own sake. They are built for the people inside them. And when the people matter more than the system, everything changes. He closed the log and watched the station breathe.